right, everybody. Not the week in Atlanta that the Boston Celtics had planned. When I say week, I mean a week. They've been there for 6 days, people. 6 days in Atlanta, 2 L's, including the dramatic overtime loss tonight. Dejounte Murray with the shot damn near the buzzer, 0.1 second left. We're going to get all into it. This is Green with Envy. We got ourselves a hell of a post-game breakdown coming up, so let's lock in. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into another edition of Green with Envy, post-game edition. Celtics in Atlanta, take two L's and get the hell out of town. That's basically how the Hawks felt about it tonight. Celtics wrap up their week-long stay in Atlanta with 2 L's, this time in overtime, at the hands of what can only be described as the Dejounte Murray game. I'm your boy, Will Weir, checking in. Here to help me break down what we just witnessed tonight in Atlanta is my best friend, co-host, and the coach of our podcast, Greg Benakis. Greg, I mean, honestly, like it's March. Weird things are happening as they always do in March as we get towards the postseason and teams are balancing competitiveness with getting healthy, but doesn't feel good leaving Atlanta with 2 losses.
No. And I kind of want to call on the viewers to drop some comments because I feel like this is a misery needs company type of pod that we're doing here. We are live on YouTube. We're live on our Twitter. So if anybody has any comments, just drop them in the chat. Love to kind of make this interactive if we can. If we can't, let's just talk about Dejounte Murray and let's talk about how the Celtics couldn't grab a defensive rebound, giving up 17 offensive rebounds, got absolutely killed on second chance points. But Dejounte was that dude tonight, man. He's talking all that shit all night. And that's the one thing about Dejounte, you know, this pretty much is his playoffs right now. And this is the Hawks playoffs because more likely than not, they're not going to actually make the playoffs. So they're
they're going to be in that play-in, and we've seen weird stuff happen in the play-in. But I think even more than this being Dejounte's playoff, and I don't know how happy or not happy he is playing with Trae Young. This is the audition for the Hawks offseason of, do we trade Trae Young? Because we're seeing what our team looks like right now with Dejounte, right. And they are missing they're missing Jalen Johnson, they're missing Onyeka Okongwu, they're missing Sadiq Bey. So imagine if we just traded Trae for whatever they get. It's going to be a somewhat decent return. And this is Dejounte's audition to say, I can be the guy. Maybe we move Trae.
I can take 44 shots.
Okay, yeah. Let me read his stat line real quick, just because it is pretty ridiculous. Dejounte Murray tonight, 18 of 44. And I'm gonna try and check this up when you start talking again. I think he took every single shot in overtime. There might have been one putback that technically wasn't him, but I'm pretty sure almost every shot was Dejounte Murray in overtime. He goes 6 of 19 from 3, finishes with 44 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists. Only 3 turnovers, but 44 shots, the number that really sticks out to you.
Let's see. The Hawks were 5 for 9 in overtime. Dejounte Murray was 5 for 8.
Yeah, so I knew there might have been one like putback in there, so in that scrum, I think. That ended up in Derek White with the jump ball. Towards the end, there might have been one like Wes Matthews shot in there.
Wes Matthews? Yeah, I think it was Wes Matthews. It was
a
Wes Matthews shot. Yeah. Wes Matthews. And like, was that
literally Dejounte Murray just went 1-on-5 offensively in overtime.
What did you think about Mazzulla leaving Porzingis out on an island?
Well, my first thought was when on that last shot that Murray had when we were coming off of the Jaylen Brown elbow jump shot, and there's I think 6-something seconds left. My first thought was, dear God, if Mazzulla still has Porzingis in this game,
he went
come out.
Yeah,
he went with Pritchard. I was like, all right, thank God we changed something up. But I mean, I don't know if Tillman came back after he got hit in the face, so I think maybe
he didn't
changed
play
some things.
Yeah,
so that might have changed because that might have been. That seems like that would be a role, and this is something I've been tracking throughout the season, is if Horford's healthy, this is going to be one of the situations where, okay, Porzingis, you're great, and you're going to be a big part of this team in this playoff run. We got to have Horford out there because Horford's going to not be, that would have been Tillman tonight, I think, if he doesn't get hit in the face and he can come back. And again, I would have been curious to see if Joe would have made that move to Tillman being the heir apparent to Al, so to speak. So I just don't know. I mean, I guess you could have gone to Hauser, and I mean, we were getting killed on the offensive boards anyways, and I thought Porzingis was, just to be frank, pretty weak on the boards tonight.
Yeah, he was terrible.
So I think you could have gone to that move, but I think Missoula didn't want to get too small, and obviously there are advantages earlier in that overtime where you have the advantage of Porzingis on the offensive end from the post and from the nail. So I mean, I think probably there's a breaking point when he's done it 4 times in a row, but I think like I said, without Tillman, without Horford, I'm not too bent out of shape about it, but it definitely was an adjustment that could have been made.
Yeah, I think there were some moments, dead ball situations where you probably could have gone offense, defense there.
Back on it, but you're probably right.
They finally sent 2 to the ball. Jalen ended up doubling Dejounte,
It's
and
like in the corner 3-point line, I think. Yeah.
3 straight buckets that he had on Porzingis. And Dejounte's one of those dudes, man. We've seen it before. He can get really hot, and that mid-range is really hard to guard because he shoots it so high. He's got such long arms. It's really tough to contest. And the Celtics did a good job. And at the end of the game, we sub in Pritchard. We have our best defender guarding him in isolation at the top of the key, plays decent defense. I think with Murray, he loves that little hang dribble going to his left into the pull-up. So I think scouting report, you got to send him right, make him fade to his right, pulling up off the rhythm dribble with his left hand. But that's kind of what you would ask for in that situation, is that, your best defender is guarding their best offensive player. You live with the results. And
he had just locked him up. I think either the possession right before that, I think Holiday took over the assignment, was like, and he just refused to get screened. That was the biggest part. He absolutely refused to get screened, picked him up in the backcourt and made sure that wasn't going to happen. And that's how they ended up with that jump ball with Derek White.
Right. And then I do want to talk about that last offensive possession where they kind of used Tatum as a decoy there. They set up the same action that they did, the game winner that he hit against the Sixers last year when he pulled up on Melton. The play that we've seen them run, a bunch of times on that side out of bounds with Tatum starting with the head start out of the backcourt. They go to that in with 6 seconds left in regulation. Tatum shoots a fadeaway 3. Like, it's the call more than the play, I think, than the player at that point, than the decision that he made.
So just looking at the end of the game versus overtime, because I thought 2 things that I'll say about the Celtics clutch offense today. We'll talk about defense, but clutch offense, just focusing on that. I thought it was very good up until that last possession in regulation. I know that the Hawks had a foul to give. Go a little bit earlier, make them take that foul with 7-8 seconds left, or force their hand to do that.
They pretty much ran the chin split action 10 possessions in a row.
Yeah. And so I know maybe I'm picking nits a little bit here, but yeah, I didn't love the offense in that last sequence that ended up in that Tatum fadeaway when you have 4 seconds left, and the sideline out of bounds play just didn't work. But I didn't love that. But then I thought when you juxtapose that with the offense they ran that ended up with, Jalen making a really tough shot with 6 seconds left in overtime. But I thought the fact that they had more options on that play. And that's the biggest thing for me, is like when I think about this Celtics team, it's not Jason Tatum or bust when it comes to the end of game shot. Every single one of those guys out there, I would be okay with taking a shot. Like there's not. Like we talked about the Jrue Holiday upgrade over Marcus Smart, is that if Holiday ends up with an open 3, I feel pretty good about that. Marcus Smart taking a last second shot, it's, he's probably going to be inserting himself in to take that shot. Whereas Holiday's going to let it come to him. Derek White, we've seen hit big shots. KP, we know, is going to have mismatches if you're actually running, different sets and different variations of offense. Jaylen Brown, we then saw have a big shot. So that's what I really loved about the OT final offensive possession.
And it was the same play. They ran the same play. They just went into a different option with the play, right? They didn't kick it out to Tatum with the full head of steam. They used him as a decoy, and they went with the post entry instead to Porzingis. So it's the same setup. They just used it as a decoy. And with that play, you got to look at the time difference, right? There's 6 seconds left in regulation versus 14 seconds left. You're tied in the regulation. You're down 1 in overtime. So there's a bunch of different things to think about. But I was really upset, man. In regulation, I knew we were going to go to the Tatum option because that's just what they like to do. But if you go back and rewatch that play, JB has pretty good post position. They ended up going to Porzingis in the post in overtime, but in the regulation, they had JB in the post, and I kind of wanted to see JB get that opportunity, being the hometown kid and everything. And I just kind of had a feeling about JB. He ended up hitting the shot in OT, and he was pumped that he got to shoot the shot. Jaylen Brown was like, let me get a fucking opportunity to close out a game. God damn it.
He only shot 17 times, and a lot of that was late. Like when he hit that shot, when he hit a big shot towards the end of regulation, I think it was like his 13th shot of the game, and he was like 7 of 12 or something. So definitely a game where Jaylen didn't get quite as many looks as you might expect. Real quick, we just do have a comment here in the chat. Why JB didn't guard DM, meaning Dejounte Murray? That's a good question. I mean, I think at times they did, but a lot of times they just screened him off. They just kept going and getting that Porzingis drop is, what it felt like.
Yeah, and I'm assuming he's referring to the last possession. I think,
or maybe just the last one. But I mean, I thought Holiday was great on that position. So I have no qualms.
And Jrue Holiday's your best defender. I think you got to get. That's why you traded for him, right? Is to lock up in moments like that. But JB did do a good job on Murray anytime he was guarding him. I'd have to go back and look at the matchups. I'm pretty sure they went with Tatum on Capella to negate any switching there or any pick and roll advantage there. I think they had Brown on Hunter, Derek White on Bogdanovich, and Pritchard on Matthews. I think that was how they had set it up there. So I don't have any issues with that. If they try and bring somebody into the action, you don't want to bring Wes Matthews into the action because then you're just double, right? So I think that makes the most sense, the way that they went about that. But JB did a good job when he was guarding DeJounte. I think you give that you give that assignment to Jrue 10 times out of 10, though.
But real quick, while we're talking about JB, let's flip back to the offensive side. So I retweeted a post today or a part of a clip from a video from Tom Habistro, who was talking about how he thinks Jaylen Brown should get more looks in the clutch versus Jason Tatum. And he had a couple of stats that back it up. And also that, from a 20-point per game scorer, there's no bigger drop off in usage rate for a player than there is for Jaylen Brown, during that stretch. And so I do think it's interesting when we think about, JB hitting a big shot tonight, hitting a couple big shots tonight.
JB was 1 for 4 in overtime.
Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, it's tough with this team late, man, because this is the last piece of the puzzle, right? So it's the, I tweeted out at one point, I was like, this is the most important 13.9 seconds that's not important, just for the vibes of it, because at the end of the day, I still feel really, really good about this team, but it is those late game executions. I do feel like overall, despite the loss, there were incremental improvements in certain parts of.
Well, I like I said earlier, I like that they found an action that they liked. They went to the chin action, right? So they're basically, for those of you that are listening, and Adam's done a great job kind of breaking down plays like this, but they set up in a horns, right? So the 3 guys that they had in that kind of triangle at the top, of the 2 guys at the elbow, one ball handler at the top, they had some combination of Derek White, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown. And they went to that action over and over and over again. And the action starts with an entry into one of the elbows, and then there's a split action with the other 2 guys right around the nail, right? So they're trying to create some confusion. They try to get that flare screen. They got the flare screen for White for an open 3 that he knocked down. So they went to that action multiple times in the fourth quarter. From my count, I think I had it at 6 times in the last 4 minutes. So I'd have to go back and watch it. So one thing, and if you're looking for silver linings from this and late game execution, we've been harping on the Celtics not running plays and just going ISO, right? So the fact that they did go to an action and a set that they liked was encouraging to me, that they set that up with their 3 best players. In the fourth quarter. I think that those are the 3 guys you really want handling the ball. The one thing that was interesting to me was that now you have Porzingis just spaced to the corner, and Porzingis isn't necessarily like a great corner 3-point shooter. His feet are so big, it's tough for him to get them behind the line and stay in bounds. And
I think he's hit a very limited amount of corner 3-pointers this year. I know it's a relatively funny number, but I was thinking of actually this with Kristaps. So he comes back after missing whatever he missed, like 6 or 7 games. And his first game back, he hit 5 of 9 threes. And tonight he was 2 of 7. So over his last 4 games, he's 5 of 22 from 3. He's 37% of the season. That's not bad, right? That's solid. And it's for him, it's sometimes more about the volume of threes and where on the court that he shoots them from. But, 4 games, small sample size, 5 of 22, not great. I am curious if there are going to be teams in the playoffs that, because especially in the first, 45 minutes of a game or so, you have so many decisions to make for the Celtics about what you're going to live with, what you're going to be okay with, who you're going to focus on, that I do wonder if some teams for stretches and for maybe even games, and we've seen it, that KP can be a little bit streaky.
Yeah,
From 3-point
Zach
range.
Lowe actually just talked about this on his pod with Doris Burke. He was bringing up that he's wondering with Porzingis if they're going to start treating him like teams will treat Miles Turner, where they'll be like, that's the thing that we'll live with, is a Miles Turner wide open three up at the top.
Because there's some nights KP just doesn't have it. I mean, I think back to, it was a meaningless game when we went to San Antonio, and the Celtics won by like 35 points, and it felt like a preseason game. But one thing that stood out to me is Porzingis had a million open shots and couldn't hit a single one of them. And it was just one of those nights. I mean, but we've seen that happen a few times this year.
Yeah, I mean, you got to pick your poison at some point. I think one of the things with this team is that, Zach Lowe's point was Porzingis is getting so good when you go to the pick and pop, and then that rotation guy coming off the wing will rotate over and leave that next pass open for the corner three. Porzingis has been so good at that, which can then trigger a lot of rotations and get the Celtics really flowing. So he was saying that, like, that is the rotation that he's wondering if teams will stop making, because it does trigger so much flow within the offense today. And the offense tonight was just like very, very gummy. There wasn't much flow to a lot.
That's a good word for it.
Yeah, not a lot that was happening tonight that I felt like the Celtics were ever in a rhythm. And maybe it's because the starting five hasn't played together in X number of games.
Or 2.5, 3 weeks. I think it was March 7th, I believe. So yeah, 3 weeks exactly since the last time they played together.
Yeah, so it did seem like they were trying to feel each other out a little bit on the offensive side of the ball, but it really was good to have Jrue back, man. There was we're going to get to this here in a second, but Jrue was on the Draymond Green podcast recently, and just hearing him talk and how good of a dude he seems like such a great teammate. For him to miss the last 5 games and to see him back on the court tonight and the impact that he has on both sides of the ball. You saw him hitting threes, you saw him flying in for rebounds, just making the right play more often than not. It was really nice to see Jrue Holiday back on the court.
Yeah, and he didn't look like, I mean, there was nothing that stood out to me as like, oh, that shoulder is bothering him. So he
ran into some screens.
Yeah, I mean, he played 37 minutes tonight. So he played a full minute set. Obviously, even with the overtime here, was 5 of 11, 3 of 6 from 3, had 13 points, 7 rebounds, 5 assists, a steal, a block. I mean, like we said, the commenter was curious if Jaylen Brown should have been guarding Dejounte Murray. I mean, like we said, Jrue stripped him the play before that, right? Like, and I said before, like, Jrue not getting screened was the biggest reason for that even being able to happen, was him just refusing to let that switch happen. So I thought Jrue looked great tonight. I think it definitely was great to have, Jrue back out there. And, right now, anything else you want to touch on this game here before we move on to Jrue Holiday?
It did have me a little bit worried come playoff time. I know we didn't have Horford tonight. He's such an important part to our late game offense and defense and the versatility.
I mean, the Hawks are missing 4 rotation players, so it's hard to make that excuse at this point. But I know,
right? I mean, yes, but at the same time, like, just in terms of the way that playoff basketball is played, I think that with the Celtics needing to be able to be versatile on the defensive side of the ball, like Trae Young being out doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the Celtics defensive adjustments, right? That's team agnostic, right? So the Celtics not being able to have that Al Horford on there did have me a little bit worried come playoff time. If Horford was to miss any extended period of time, like, there's not quite as much that we have. And Tillman went down, so we didn't have the Al Horford facsimile out there, but Tillman honestly has just not been good enough on the offensive side of the ball to, be on the court.
He's shooting that corner 3, but he's not making it.
3 for 17. 3 for 17.
An issue.
Right, that's an issue in Boston.
Last question before we go on to Jrue Holiday. So I feel like, do you think Mazzulla, if he had Horford as an option tonight, do you feel confident he would have made that move? This is completely hypothetical. So
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm a little. I think after the first 2, he would have made it. At least I would hope so, because there
have been games where he sat KP for Horford this year.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be one of the trickier things for Missoula throughout a series is just making those tough decisions, which he has done at times. You're right, is making those tough decisions of who needs to be out there and putting ego to the side. And I don't think this team has a ton of that, so I think that makes it a little bit easier. But there is going to be tough decisions where you're in a game 3, game 4, game 5, and maybe KP or maybe it's Holiday, maybe it's Derek White. I doubt it's one of the Jays, but other than that, like those 3 guys plus Horford, maybe there's a Pritchard or a Hauser moment like that. They have, a different lineup out there. So it's going to be interesting to see Missoula make those decisions as we go throughout the playoffs. But biggest story for the Celtics, Jrue Holiday back, starting lineup back together. That's massive. That's going to be super helpful as we look towards just 9 games left here. Celtics will have a few of their remaining competitive games coming up next week. Their magic number still remains at 4 right now to go ahead and clinch the number 1 overall seed in the NBA. One of the teams on their heels, the Thunder, will be in town next week, so that will be a big game next Wednesday. But let's go to Jrue Holiday. He made his return tonight. He missed 5 games with that shoulder impingement, dead arm, whatever you wanted to label it as. He was back, looked good. And he also made an appearance on the Draymond Green podcast this past week. I thought it was a really interesting conversation. Greg, I know you have a very specific clip that you wanted to dig into here.
But let's hold off on the clip. I just wanted to talk a little bit more about like overall takeaways from that conversation. The clip that I have pulled up has to do with Jrue Holiday's defensive role with the Celtics. But first thing, with Draymond, it's really interesting. I don't listen to the Draymond Green show. I see the clips when they pop up on social media. And when I saw that Jrue Holiday was on the Draymond Green show, I was like, all right, yeah, I'll give it a chance. I'll listen to it because I want to hear Jrue. And it's so funny when you see the demonstrative Draymond that you see on the court where he's such a freaking asple. And then when you see him
thrown out of a game again last night. Did you see the look on Steph's face after that?
Oh, he was 4 minutes in the game, dude.
Like, are you kidding me?
And to hear him talk with Jrue Holiday and the reverence with which he speaks, this is why Draymond was kind of being groomed as the next analyst for TNT, right? Because he's so good on a microphone. He's really good at interviewing. It was just a great interview that he had, but it's just so funny to me because I don't listen to the show to hear Draymond be such a good interview. And like the podcast was very engaging with Jrue. But what were your takeaways listening to it before we get into this clip?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you don't hear a ton from Jrue Holiday, so I think it's kind of cool just to kind of, peel back the layers a little bit and get to hear from his perspective. When it comes to the whole players being traded thing, I know everybody wants a heads up. I don't know what the answer to that is.
They talk about it a little bit. They're like, yeah, from a front office perspective, like you can't really. I think they even mentioned what happened with Brogdon.
Right.
You can't.
That's the other side of it. Imagine if it's like, hey man, pretty sure we're like 90% of the way there. We have a trade, and then it's like you come back like, nah, that didn't work out. Like that's not going to work for anybody. Like, and that's just not how it works.
Still comfortable coming off the bench, Malcolm.
Yeah, right. Like even in a 9-to-5 job, like when you get fired, very rarely is it like, hey man, I'm pretty sure you're getting fired tomorrow, but let's circle back in the morning. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. Yeah. Like it's just not going to work. So that is what it is. But it is interesting hearing how that all goes down. He's taking the naps. I love those kind of behind the scenes stories that we're just never going to know of, like how these things actually come to fruition and how they're in motion. So that was interesting. And then the other part that I thought was pretty intriguing was him talking about defensively, him kind of matching up with Joe Mazzulla. It's almost
that's the clip. That's the clip.
Okay, yeah. So that was definitely for me the most interesting part was that. So maybe let's just actually go into that clip because I think that'd be fun to talk about.
Being a roamer or disrupting, kind of like what you said, has been so fun to me. Yeah. It's been so fun because I see the game in a different way now. I see the reason why I'm on this person. I started to catch it now. Me and Joe talk about that quite a bit. Like I started to catch what Joe is thinking defensively before he tells me. I'd be like, "Hey, you want to do this?" He'd be like, "Yeah, that's what I want to do." I'm like, "See, I'm starting to catch on." Before I was just so locked into hounding the ball, disrupting it, sending them over the screen, sending them down to Brooke or Yanni. Before that, sending them to AD when I was with the Pelicans. So it was like it was a consistent type of thing that I was doing. And now, bro, one day I might be on a non-shooter. The next day I might be on a shooter. I might be on the big for if they want to come up and set a screen, but we don't want the big in it. So because I'm on him, now he's in the corner, and now they're going with like somebody else who's maybe less of a shooter. You know what I'm saying? Like so many things playing to the defense now, and I didn't see the game that way.
Yeah, that clip right there is exactly what I was referencing. And, we've talked a lot this year about, and we've seen a few clips of Missoula empowering Jrue Holiday to basically be a defensive coordinator. We've compared it a lot to like an Ed Reed free safety out there that kind of gets to roam around and call the shots. But it is interesting because we've talked about how good of a defender Jrue Holiday has been, multiple time all NBA defense. Something that was crazy that Draymond brought up is that it is pretty ridiculous to think that, and I think Marcus deserved defensive player of the year. Like I have no problem with it. Like if you could have given it to someone else, and I still wouldn't have argued with it that much. But I think he was very deserving. The fact that Jrue Holiday's never finished above 7th, that kind of blew my mind. Just with like how much he is respected as a defender. But when you think about the teams that he's played for, I hadn't really thought about the way he's utilized, in which he was always he's that guard on an island on the perimeter, and then knowing that he's either feeding it into the Anthony Davis, the Giannis, the Brook, or that, he's to be out there on an island and knowing that he has them. And it's just a very different version of Jrue Holiday that the Celtics get right now. And it's really cool to hear about the connectivity between him and Missoula and the way that almost between the two of them, they're playing like their own version of chess to see if they know what each other's thinking and what they want to do defensively. So I thought that was really cool to hear about Holiday's past experiences and how it's so much different with this version of his defensive abilities within this Celtic system.
Yeah, it was really cool. And then he also, as that clip extends, for those of you that are interested, I just pulled that clip off of the Draymond YouTube. So if you haven't listened to the interview yet, where he starts talking about the Celtics experience, it's right around the 30-minute mark. That was from like the 37-minute mark. So if you want to hear a little bit more directly from Jrue, as we're just here summarizing it, but he did talk about how like he was never considered a vocal player, because when you're on the ball, there's no reason to be vocal, right? You're listening. You're a consumer of your teammates' voices as they're telling you where to go and how to navigate the screens. And now that he's in different positions, he has to be more vocal, which is really interesting that at this advanced stage of his career, Jrue Holiday is still growing as a player and is that just speaks to his basketball IQ, because when you're taught to do one thing and you do it at the most elite level, you probably don't want to change because you're so good at it, right? But now that Joe Mazzulla is just like absolute just like crazy person of a coach, where he's trying all these different
black
things.
Night.
He did. Yeah, jiu-jitsu training gone wrong. And just really cool to see Jrue like appreciate Mazzulla. And we think Missoula's done a really good job this year, but it's nice to hear from a player like Jrue,
right,
who's so respected around the league, that he's like, yeah, like Jrue, like Joe really gets it. And like, I get Joe now, and now we're on the same page. That's really encouraging for long-term success with Joe Mazzulla as a Celtics coach, and also short-term success with Jrue Holiday as his defensive pit bull.
Yeah. And I mean, at least, and this is just me trying to read a little bit of tea leaves here, we're a couple of days away from a potential Jrue Holiday extension. Right. At least the talk's able to happen, right? So in the real way for this to happen smoothly is, I think right now Jrue Holiday's at $37 million. That's not really a sustainable number. And so
25, Jrue? 22?
That's right. That would be ideal. I think the middle ground is, can we get to 28 to 30 is probably around what the Celtics are hoping, 2-3 years in that range. So I'm hearing the way that Holiday talks about Mazzulla and then later talks about some of his teammates specifically. I thought the way that he talked about Jaylen Brown was something that stood out to me. That makes me feel better that like, okay, maybe this is something that we can get done, because, he is such a crucial part, important part of this team. And we saw this in the couple games that he was out. We talked about this being going from Marcus to Jrue. It's a big switch, because Jrue is an upgraded Marcus at just about everything. Sorry, Marcus, but that's probably true. He's just about upgraded just about everything slightly, but he also is cool kind of shifting what his main role is night to night. And so that, not that ego is always a bad thing, but the lack thereof ego from Jrue Holiday, I think, is really important for the team chemistry of the Celtics. Was there anything else that stood out to you from that interview that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, you mentioned how he speaks about Tatum and Brown a little bit, and there's also another clip where he's talking about the pressure that they face in Boston. I think I had the right clip pulled up here. Go ahead and hit play.
I'm on this side and seeing like the pressure that they go through and how they handle themselves is like is ultimate professional. Like, I don't think a lot of people would be able to do what they do.
No, that's incredible. And they carry it well because it doesn't come off that way. Like, obviously, we all hear the talking heads on ESPN or on this show, or like, but to be feeling that pressure at home, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, to be feeling that pressure from your fans, to like, that's a different type of thing to handle, because when at any moment, like, you hit a rough patch.
Yeah.
Like, you should trade this person, you should trade that person.
Right.
And yet you still got to try to keep that same love for this fan base because you're one and the same in the sense you're trying to do the same. That's a tough thing to do. And I don't think people realize how much that takes and how much that says about those two.
And I think it's just really cool to hear, you know, the respect that Tatum and Brown have from Draymond. Draymond loves Jason Tatum, and he clearly has grown a lot in his respect for Jaylen Brown.
The only other time I've listened to his podcast is when Jason Tatum was on.
Yeah. And then Jrue, just like, he speaks so glowingly, and it's so genuine with Jrue. Another thing that I just want, like, overall takeaways about Jrue Holiday, he seems like the greatest dude ever. Seems like the best teammate to
talking
have.
about his wife and his family, and
like
when he took away time when I think was it cancer?
She had a brain tumor.
Brain tumor, that's what it was. And he was kind of like, yeah, this comes first. And like, you know, the way that he handled that whole situation, and the way that he talks about it, he's like, dude, she's got this many gold medals, and you know, like she's actually the star of the family. I'm second fiddle. You know what I mean? Which, you know, when you line up their accomplishments, it's probably true, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, but you know, and then one final thing, when they were talking about the Olympic team, and Draymond is pretty clear that he knows he's not going to be part of that team.
Yeah.
And they're comparing like who they are as defenders and who they are as players. And Draymond's just like, you're way better of a basketball player than I could ever hope to be. It was just really cool to hear Draymond say that, because when you see Draymond, you would never think that he would be so self-effacing and that he would tell somebody, one of his peers, that, oh yeah, you're just better than I am. But he was just like, yeah, Jrue, you're unbelievable. You're such a good basketball player. Like, I hope that I'm part of that team, so I can just carry somebody's bags, because this team's going to be so good. So it was cool to hear Draymond just speak so highly of Jrue and the reputation that he clearly has around the league. Like, all the players know, if there's ever a question, Marcus Smart or Jrue Holiday, like, the players will tell you who the better player is. And like this podcast, and you and I don't have any illusions that Marcus is on the same level as Jrue, but there are some Celtics fans that still think that. And it's pretty obvious the way that Drew's reputation is around the league, that everyone thinks so highly of him. And hopefully the Celtics do get that deal done. Hopefully they give him the extension, because despite Dejounte Murray hitting that shot on him, to bring this podcast full circle, Drew's been a great addition to this team, and hopefully we get him on an extension.
Yeah, and I think his versatility is going to be so incredibly important in the postseason, right? Because like you said, now he's guarding Joel Embiid. Some nights he's guarding a relative non-shooter, and he's basically becoming that roamer role on offense. He sometimes plays in the dunker. He plays in the dunker spot quite a bit. He shoots 60% from three. He can have nights where he has 7-8 assists. Like, he's so versatile on both sides of the ball that his name's going to be all over every one of the post-game reactions that we do in the postseason. So I think that will be, that'll be huge. And we're actually, just kind of rounding out this show here, looking ahead. Celtics doesn't get much easier. They're going to be going to play the New Orleans Pelicans, who I know they were up. I'm trying to check right now I think they did beat they beat the Bucks tonight, 107-100. So the Pelicans are playing some of their best basketball. Celtics take them on Saturday. Drew's old team, the
Zion,
fifth place Pelicans.
Zion's
been looking really good. Man. No Brandon Ingram for them, but they've got wings on wings. So Trey Murphy and Herb Jones just step right into place. So that's not another easy game here for the Celtics team. That will be another game to get battle tested. Hopefully Al's back for that game.
If the Celtics losing and the Bucks losing, the Celtics are still 11 games up.
Right. Yeah. You can't even pay the East at this point. Like it's the East. Like if you just look at the standings here real quick, the East is all about just looking at the bottom and how that's all going to play out between the 6, 7, 8 race right now, which even that looks like the Pacers are putting a little bit of distance. It's becoming more and more likely 7, 8 is going to be Heat, Sixers. Like we said, 9, 10 will be Bulls, Hawks. We just played each of them here. The Bulls gave the Celtics, a run for their money. The Hawks just won 2 games. So it's not going to be easy no matter where you look. And then the Magic playing so well. The Cavs have had so many injuries. And yet when they have the Cavs' biggest issue is that they haven't been at their best with all of their guys healthy. All of their good runs throughout the year have come with 1 or 2 guys hurt at different times. So who knows what to make of them? The Knicks are just got Mitchell Robinson back. They're up into the 3 seed now. And the Bucks, like we said, it's funny. We had just praised Chris Middleton. And then I think the very next game, he went 4 of 19. Mm-hmm. And it's to me, it's still just what Chris Middleton do you get night tonight? If you get the Chris Middleton that Boston played a week ago, and you add obviously Giannis to that mix, that's a really, really scary team that I think is the Celtics need to be really, really worried about and need to, bring their shit every single night. If you get the Chris Middleton, that's 4 of 19 and can't D anybody and is, seems like he's still banged up, then I as good as Giannis is and, as good as Dame can be, I don't think it's going to be enough. But to me, that's still, that's everything is still on the table. And so it's going to be a tough run in the East, no matter which way you look at it right now. So, I mean, that's where the East is going to play out because it is. I just still can't believe it's 11 games. It looks stupid to look at it.
Yeah. And it stinks to lose back-to-back games to the Hawks. Time will tell if this was a sign of things to come in the playoffs. Right. The Celtics still have issues, but for the time being, I'm not going to overreact to this back-to-back loss to the Hawks. The Pelicans game will be interesting because I think that will test the team's resolve. It will test their mettle. They don't want to lose 3 games in a row, right? Mm-hmm. Going against a team that long shot, they could see them in the NBA finals, but it's playing really good basketball right now. It's just a really good test for the Celtics because we haven't seen Zion, right? We haven't seen a really healthy Zion in a couple of years play the Celtics. So it'll be a good test to see how we deal with that. Their length, their versatility, their athleticism is something that we're going to see a lot of in the playoffs potentially. So it'll be fun to see how the Celtics respond. I'm looking forward to it. That game is an early start on Saturday. I think it's 4 Central, 5 Eastern. I think that's the right time.
Got that pulled up. Yeah, 4 Central, 5 Eastern. Yeah, it's a weird Saturday start time. But yeah, Saturday, 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Central. That will be a fun game to tune into.
Yeah, and we won't have a post game for that, but we will be doing our Sunday 3-man weave episode. Adam should be back for that. So we'll talk about that game and then we'll look at some of the bigger picture things with the Celtics on Sunday as well. That pod will probably drop afternoon time on Sunday. And then audio Sunday midday that game's that night. So we'll see. Just stay tuned. We'll have the game time. Oh no, the game's on Saturday. So yeah, so Sunday, the audio should drop probably midday and then YouTube probably around 4 or 5 that night. So we'll have that all covered for you guys. We appreciate you guys joining us here. Celtics take a couple of L's here in Atlanta, but plenty of time to bounce back down the stretch here and get things right for the playoffs. Pelicans on Saturday. That's going to do it for myself, for Greg. Adam will be back with us on Sunday, and we will catch you guys later. Here's some Black Sheep Optimists to enjoy your day. Peace.
Every time I get this high, I lose my mind. It don't take much no more until I hit the floor. Every time I get this high, it's you I find. It don't take much no more until I'm at your door.
You cut me to my core, baby. What can I say? You got me on the floor, you know I came to play. I know I shouldn't, but you seem to take my pain away. And every time I score, Jason Tatum fade away. I close my eyes and I'm floating your river. I call to see if you open, you know I hope you deliver. Every time you're getting close, I still be sick with the shivers. But there's nothing like that first time. I still